Let's make February's flower the violet. Hi, and welcome to my craft room. My name is Kelsey. I also call myself Dinosaur Mama, and today we are making paper violets. If you are new to paper flower making, I have to say these are going to be probably like one of the simplest flowers that I've ever made. And so if you're new, this is a great beginner paper flower tutorial. If you are new to my craft room, welcome. I'm so happy you are here to craft with me. The first thing you should know is the free SVG file for this is going to be linked down in the description below. You will see a link to my blog post where you can download the free SVG. Lately, I have been doing both Cricut Design Space and Silhouette Studio tutorials, so let's jump into that, starting with Cricut Design Space, Silhouette Studio, and then we will get to assembling. Okay, we are in Cricut Design Space here, and you see you have 3 parts for each flower. I only included 1 leaf, 1 full flower, and 1 center, which is optional. So you can multiply this as many times as you want. I, on a 12 by 12 piece of paper, was able to cut 24 of the flowers and probably close to about 18 to 20 of the leaves. Keep in mind, I kept them as whole flowers. Totally up to you how many you want to make, but violets are definitely like a group flower, so it's not just a one-off flower. So to make them look a little more full, I would definitely suggest making a few of them. In my preview, you saw my group on a flower block, and I have about 10 in there. So they're all grouped together with the leaves, but I leave it up to you on how many you want to make. So these flowers, if we're looking at just the flower, I'm going to ungroup, is about 2.5 inches. That is about the size of an actual violet, but please go ahead and make them whatever size you want. Their leaves are very big, so that's why I made them this size. But once you have it ready to go, you can hit make, and then you can just change your project copies here. So if you wanted to do like 20. I also cut mine out on my silhouette. That's why it's different. Ooh, but look at how nice these petals are all laid out. That's pretty nice. So each flower is going to have 5 petals. Just a heads up. So you can cut this out. I use 65-pound cardstock. For Cricut, I like to use the medium cardstock setting on fast mode. So let's jump over into Silhouette Studio. All right, now we're in Silhouette Studio. So the first thing you'll want to do is set up your mat. You can use whatever you have, obviously 12 by 12 or 8.5 by 11. I tend to use 12 by 12 paper. Now my suggestion for Silhouette Studio is use the duplication here, spread them out, and then I grab all of them and I also spread them down. And then what I do is I nest them. So I just go to the nesting right here and I hit nest, and that will usually it will set it up for us. So if you're doing them by individual petals, this is great because you'll be able to make a lot. Again, it's 5 petals per flower. If you want them to stay in this sort of shape, then to start, you're going to have to group it. So you can just right click and hit group, or you can hit, on a Mac, you can hit Command G, and then you would duplicate again. So if you want to keep them in the shape of the flower, then I would suggest doing this. And then going ahead, once you have it all spread, you could hit nest. And then of course you can duplicate again. And I would say maybe one more, and you can nest one more time. So it's totally up to you how many you want to make again, but you would go ahead and send this to your machine. And then when you're ready, just go back, do the same for the leaves and send, and then just make sure you have enough centers if you are using the center. For my silhouette, I usually end up changing a lot of my settings. I use 65-pound cardstock. It was not textured, but I still use this textured cardstock. I usually bump up my blade depth and I down my force a little bit. So it's up to you. Definitely use that test cut over here when you get to it if you don't feel like you know your settings. So let's get started on assembly. Watch my paper carnation tutorial, which I will link down below. Then you will see how I painted those on the mat as well. I like to do this while it's still on the mat because then when I remove the border, I don't have to worry about it being over the edge or getting on my table. Now for these, I decided to go with paint. This is acrylic paint that I got at the dollar store, so it is nothing fancy. I'm using white, but then I also had this like light purple that I mixed in. I started with a sponge, then switched over to a paintbrush. my suggestion when it comes to the violets is to Google pictures of violets, because that's what I did, and then color them how you see fit. So some are like really light on the edges, some are light in the center, some have yellow centers, some have white centers, some have blue centers. So I did 4 different types here to show you. Technically 2 of them look really similar, so we'll say 3 types, but I did some types to show you here the difference between the coloring, but totally dependent on how you want them to look. I leave styling up to you. I'm just here to provide templates and tutorials. For the coloring, the way that I did the light colors on the outside of the petals, and I kept my petals in the shape of the flower, and then the color, the yellow, the blue, whatever you want to do in the center. So if you're doing individual petals, just make sure you have 5 of each. So our first step is to curl our petals. I just use my fingers for this. I curled them in to give them a slight curve facing in towards the flower. You can also curl them with like a bone tool if you want. I have a bone tool next to me that I did not use, but it's totally up to you about curling your petals. I just use my fingers. And this is one of the rare occasions where I did individual petals, but I just felt like the overlap needed to be a certain way. So I'm taking my floral wire and I am placing this on, and I kind of had the floral wire on like a slight curve, so this sits flat on it. So it's not going to be showing through. You can do that and leave it without the center and have it show through. Again, up to you. But you're going to just kind of glue this flat onto the floral wire and then work your way around in a circle with each petal. And you want them to be overlapping all the way around. And then on the last one, you want to try to like scoot it under the first petal while still being on top of the petal you just did before. So that's like a full circle, I guess you could say, of overlapping petals. A never-ending repeating pattern of sorts. So I'm just going around and I'm placing them right on top with the end of the petal right in the center overlapping. And here it goes in my last petal. I'm trying to fit it in so that's like under the first petal but over the last petal that we just did. And I tried to evenly space these out, so just do the best you can with that. And now you can leave your flower like this. I have some in my flower pile that do not have the center, and then I have some that do. And you can just leave it like this if you want to, or we can add on our center. I printed centers in both yellow and in blue so that I could use either. And we are just going to hot glue those right on top. So I folded in the little prongs that are on the outside very lightly and then hot glued this right into the center of the flower. And so now we can add this into our cluster. Here is our little violet. Again, a super simple paper flower. I have more detailed flowers linked below if you want to see any other sort of paper flower tutorial or SVG file. So let's jump over to those leaves. So for your leaves, this is an optional part if you want to do it, but I fold all of my leaves in half. And then I go ahead with my bone tool and I just make detailed lines like they were like veins in the leaf. You can kind of see them in the camera. So I do that with my leaves, and then I glue them onto a short piece of floral wire as well. And then I stick it in with my bunch. So these are pretty easy to do. You can obviously skip the detail part if you want to and just fold the leaf in half and then add it to your floral wire. I leave it up to you. You can also add details in with makeup or with markers or with paint. So you will repeat this process over and over again with your leaves and then add them into your clusters of violets. And here is our final little violet bouquet with all of our different types of violets that I painted. Thank you so much for joining me today as we made our paper violets. If you learned something today and you enjoyed this tutorial, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It helps me so much. If you are new to my craft room and not subscribed yet, please consider doing so. I would love to have you join me every week for new crafts. And if you know any crafty friends, then don't forget to send this to them, especially if they're new to paper flowers. I will see you next week in my craft room, and stay crafty.